Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason. Here are your hosts, Richard Saunders and Stefan Sojka.
Richard, welcome to the Skeptic Zone number 7.
Peace upon you, Stefan.
Peace be with you too, and as we begin this lovely show that is at the top of the charts of religion and spirituality in the podcast universe, can we give thanks and praise to the great flying spaghetti monster
And the pink invisible unicorn.
and all the other entities that live on other realms and create the universe for us with which to spread the message of love and peace. So here we are, Skeptic Zone number 7.
Number 7 for the 5th of December. And you're right, we are number 1 in the religion and spirituality category in Australian podcast.
Pretty good,
iTunes.
isn't it? There's a lot of people that are interested in religion and spirituality, as we are.
We are indeed, but we take a slightly different point of view, I
Slightly
think.
different.
Yeah.
We're sort of more philosophy, I would
I
suppose.
think so. But not only that, in the past week we got up to number 12 in all podcasts in Australia.
Oh, my goodness me.
I mean in audio, and number 20 in all the podcasts. So
Wow.
the show is really doing well. Thank you, everybody, for subscribing.
And thank you. I know, and you're listening now. You must be, because you've automatically updated your podcast, and here we are.
Thank you.
And we're in for a big show.
What a show. I tell you what, we have to be quick because we're going to get straight into the show. We have our special guest, a couple of special guests. One of them is James Randi.
Oh, my goodness.
The amazing Randi.
James Randi.
He joined us a couple of months ago on a skeptical panel at DragonCon. So it's a live recording with Kylie Sturgis, Karen Stolzno, and myself, and James Randi.
Oh, awesome.
A new segment after that is the roundup with our reporter Michael Wolloghan, where he's going to be talking about Mel Gibson.
Oh, well, yeah, he's a classic.
He's
one,
a funny
isn't
guy. And Bob Larson, the Exorcist.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah.
What a show.
What a show. And that's followed by the live Dr. Rachie reports from Sydney Skeptics in the pub.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't stop there.
That's a good segment, that one.
That's a good segment. And it doesn't stop there, because following that is our regular Think Tank segment.
Oh, geez, what an action-packed show. No wonder we're right up the charts.
No wonder we're right up the charts. And when you've finished listening to the show, zip over to our website, www.skepticzone.tv, and click the video link, and there's a whole new interview with Michael Stackpole, who's a Star Wars author.
Oh.
Which Kylie Sturgis did in DragonCon special video content.
I'll tell you what, Richard, you really do get the guests in. There must be all the praying that you do.
It must be.
Yeah. I do a lot of Reiki myself, on myself.
Do you?
Yeah, and it works quite well, and I think it's helping.
I think you're looking good. Yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling good.
That's the way to do it.
And here we're in the zone.
You can do Reiki over the podcast too. Everybody, put your hand up to your iPod now. See?
Oh, I feel the love. Well, let's get straight into it.
Let's get into it, Steph.
Oh, yeah, Skeptic Zone number 7.
So as you can see up on the PowerPoint up there, Global Skepticism, we are in fact members of the Skeptic Zone, which is a vodcast podcast. We were originally the Tank Vodcast, and now we've managed to revamp the show and we've become the Skeptic Zone. What we're going to do is contact a massive range, a wide variety of countries, and ask them to answer a few questions. And the questions that they said that they would gladly answer for us involved, well, what is the history of your particular skeptical movement? What are some of the interesting things that you've faced? And what is some of the more current pressing concerns that your particular skeptical group have? Welcome to India. Okay, contacting Navendra Nayak, the president of the Indian Skeptic Movement. Here's a small soundbite that they presented about the situation in India. Now, if you look back at the history of the Indian Skeptic Movement, it actually goes back for thousands of years. They've always been an integral part of the evolution of the philosophical thought in the subcontinent. Now, there's a priestly class that has always suppressed it, and right now in India there's a revival of the so-called religious tradition. And they find victims from not only India, but worldwide, after all. Because if you think about it, there's the greatness of the Vedic culture, yoga, spirituality and stuff. You tap into that, you can get all sorts of people. So the Federation of Indian Rationalist Association is the apex body of the rationalist movement in India as of present. And they've been in their present form for about 7 decades. And they're mainly devoted to the eradication of superstitions by example.
Has anybody in the room seen a documentary called Guru Busters? Okay, I'm surprised that many people haven't. It was a brilliant documentary made, I'm guessing eight years ago, something of that order. by a British film crew where they travelled with the Indian rationalists. The Indian rationalists are a wonderful group of people who put their lives on the line, travelling around from village to village, confronting the spirit men and the witches and all this sort of thing, and challenging them on the spot to do their magical claims. And they also were behind a very famous piece of footage of the Sai Baba. It was filmed where he had a tray, and you can see him reaching underneath, and suddenly he waves his hand and a big necklace comes out, to the astonishment of the crowd. And the trouble they had to go through to get that tape out, because it was suppressed even by the government. People in the government who follow this charlatan religiously, literally religiously. I spent a couple of weeks in India. I attended the Indian Rationalist Convention in New Delhi, and that was an incredible experience all by itself, just being in India. But the conditions they work under, we don't have it tough at all in Australia. I can promise you, compared to what they go through in India with their billion-plus population and entrenched superstition, it's a very difficult thing for them. I recommend you Google Guru Busters. It's probably online. I think it was the last time I looked. There's one very controversial part of have you seen the documentary? There's one very controversial part where one of the local magicians, magic people, claims to be able to cure snake bite. And snake bite kills a lot of people in India, of course. So in order to demonstrate this, they had a dog. There's a huge crowd of people, and there was a stage in this village, and there's thousands of people turned up. And they had... it was unfortunate, but this is what they did. They had a little dog, and the snake bit the little dog. And then the magic man waved his arms and chanted and everything to save the dog. But it didn't work, and the dog died. So they got a lot of flack for that, for killing a dog in the name of science.
Next slide, please, Derek. Now heading up to Europe with Hungary. This is Gabor Harasko, the executive president of the Hungarian Skeptics Society, who was wonderful enough to write to us. And he told us about the political changes in the 80s and the early 90s. Well, the so far suppressed esoteric practices and superstitious beliefs imploded into the public arena unbalanced. And as you know, the falling of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of communism, of course that's going to have an impact. As early as 1992, scientists and media people initiated a movement, and I've got the name up there, I'm sorry I can't pronounce it, but it means something like the Society of Those Respecting Facts, which I think is a nice straightforward name. Yeah.
In fact, sorry, so I believe you had a message for the Hungarian skeptics not so long ago.
Oh, yes?
On the internet, there was a video. Was that in Hungarian or English?
No, that was in English. It's sufficiently understood in Hungary that I didn't have any problem getting across. But I must say that they are also sponsoring a definitive test of homeopathy, which is probably going to take place in Romania now. It went from Germany to Poland and now in Romania. And the academics there don't want a thing to do with it. They think that homeopathy is such a silly notion. But perhaps it will take place in Romania now, and we're putting up the $1 billion prize.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Please
You're welcome to join us, sir.
I didn't think about that. I'm not well dressed.
Oh, you are. You are.
We can just arrange a microphone for Mr. Randi. I think this gentleman has more travelled than anybody I have ever met. So.
Thank you. Okay. So yes, of course, complementary and alternative medicine has been challenged in a variety of countries, including the UK. And some of you might know about Simon Singh's recent book that he's written in regards to pseudoscience. That was the one that, in fact, I think Richard's been carrying around with him.
Trick or Treatment, a book to look out for. You could probably find it in the stores, I believe, or on Amazon. It's one to note. It's excellent. Trick or Treatment, where Simon Singh goes through a whole series of alternative medical claims and really thoroughly analyses them. And I won't give the plot away.
It's certainly...
we know the end of the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an excellent introduction to some of the more basic ideas behind CAM. So if you're intrigued by this and want to learn more, it's a very useful text. Yeah. The next country that we're heading for is New Zealand. Oh, no, hang on. No, UK. Yay! Yay! Which is good, because that's a lovely lead into my point, because we mentioned Simon Singh, and this is Dr. Chris French, who I believe was at TAM 6.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Dr. Chris French is of the UK Skeptics, and it was intriguing that I wrote to him saying, "Hi, I know you're involved with the UK Skeptics. Can you tell us about what you're doing?" And he said, UK Skeptics is an umbrella term, and the UK isn't like that. You can see by the dot points there how many groups they have. We've got the Skeptics in the Pub, the Anomalistic Psychology Research Centre, the APRU Invited Speaker Series. That's at Goldsmiths College, where Dr. Chris French teaches. We have the CFI London branch that has recently opened. There's the Association for Skeptical Inquiry, or ASCI. And the Bad Psychics website is another group that Chris French mentioned. So they just have a plethora of people involved in a great deal of activities, including, as you can see up the picture there of the Skeptics in the Pub.
And that was actually started by an Australian, of course.
Oh,
Dr.
really?
Scott Campbell, yes.
Ah.
He was on our New South Wales committee.
Of course it was.
Yeah, of course.
I think the British skeptics also benefit from very high-profile celebrities who are proud skeptics. Who's heard of Ricky Gervais, the comedian?
Yes, from The Office.
Quite a skeptic. Hugh Laurie, who plays
House,
of course.
Yep,
Stephen Fry.
Stephen Fry.
In fact, Mr. Randi, you did an excellent series in the UK about 1991. James Randi, psychic
spent that
investigator.
money already, though.
And in the audience were, in fact, Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry.
Yes, they showed up and they snuck in and sat in the front row so the people behind them couldn't see their faces, didn't know who they were, and they had a reading done for them. Talk about a fiasco. It was a total fiasco with a capital F. And that's a dirty laugh. I'll bottle that and take it with me.
I think it's also interesting to note that in the UK, as well as in this country, in our country, Australia, one of the most common claims that we get are water divining, water dowsing. It's such a strong illusion or delusion that it's spread all over the world.
I think it's particularly prominent in Australia because of the problems we have with drought.
But Mr. Andy, many of the people who come to you for the $1 Million Challenge, I believe, are claiming some sort of water dowsing.
Oh, yes. I've done extensive tests of dowsing, or divining, if you will, in Australia, with the help of our good friend Dick Smith, of course, who has supported the skeptical movement in Australia very, very successfully over many years. Been an enthusiastic supporter. And guess what? The dowsers didn't win the $1 Million Prize. I know that's astonishing to you, but it's true nonetheless.
Yeah. Ooh, shall we move on to the next one? That's New Zealand. Great. Okay, here we go.
It's the Australian flag, isn't it?
No, it's not the Australian flag. They coloured in the little bits in the middle red, as you can see, and that makes them New Zealanders. And this is Vicky Hyde, who I believe Richard Saunders, in fact, knows.
Vicky Hyde is the chair... that's her theme music now, I hear.
She's like a fairy.
It must be her.
Like magic, yeah.
Vicky Hyde is what she calls herself, the chair entity of New Zealand Skeptics. And it's the chair entity, not the chair person or the chairwoman or the chairman or anything like that, the chair entity. And the media can never understand what this means. They can continually get it wrong.
Yeah.
Have you been to New Zealand, sir?
Oh, yeah. Have I been to New Zealand? Did Dolly Parton sleep on her back? I mean, let's get real. Yes, I have, several times. Thank you. Wonderful country. Too many sheep, but nonetheless,
Yes,
a
More
lovely
sheep
country.
than people.
It is a charming country. It's beautiful. It's not only the scenery is like Lord of the Rings, you're just beautiful, but the people are charming and the sheep are lovely.
Okay, let's quickly move on to China. Quick. There we go, China. Okay, this is John Lombard. Now, some people who might know him around on forum boards as Wolfman, and he is an inspirational person. I believe that he attended TAM 6, so some people might know him from that. John Lombard speaks here about how in 2008, very recent, he helped establish China's first formal skeptical organisation in cooperation with Chinese scientists and intellectuals. He lives in Beijing, where he's in the process of setting up a new business. And one of his main focuses for the past 10 years or so in China has beginning to promote critical thinking skills in Chinese education, something that's dreadfully lacking. He and a small group of Chinese scientists intellectuals got together to establish the first formal skeptical organisation. Now, not much has been done yet. I mean, the Olympics has just overwhelmed everything. I mean, gosh, I probably can't even find parking to get to the meeting, let alone get much done. But there's plans to begin with a small group events in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and then work towards building a national organisation. Yeah, I believe you've travelled around the Asian areas yourself.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Extensively. I have very, very good friends in China, as a matter of fact, because of those encounters. But I must say, a great disappointment. The U.S. Embassy in China, they refused to give visas to 2 Chinese who wanted to attend the last amazing meeting, which was our record one, in order to represent the Chinese cause of skepticism. And they refused because both of them were young, attractive, unmarried Chinese women. And they told me in so many words, these people are not going to get visas. There's no question of it. We do not give visas to young, attractive, unmarried Chinese women. This is ridiculous. I think with the administration about to change, folks, probably noticed that, coming up in November, we may have a change in that attitude. I certainly hope so. That was a blow to us because we were looking forward to entertaining these people and hearing what they had to say. And they had a lot to say, believe me, because China is trying very hard to develop a skeptical movement there. I must say that when I was on one of my trips to China, and there have been several over the years, I got to talk to 2 Harvard-educated Chinese professors there who were in charge of an acupuncture clinic, and it was moxibustion and the whole thing, all the varieties of acupuncture that you can imagine. And they confided in me. They said quite plainly, our medical system is absolutely overpowered by the number of cases that pour in here every day. So there's a lineup at the door every single day. We sort them out into people that need medical care and people who are imagining that they need medical care. And in some cases, we can't do it because we just don't have the facilities, but we take into the acupuncture clinic those that just imagine they need care, and they always go away satisfied because they've had something Chinese done. And he showed us a room, I'd say 3 times the size of this, jammed with people with smoking needles and such. This moxibustion has a little platform on the end, and they put a bit of wood punk on it, and they light it. And apparently the healing heat goes down through this narrow steel wire. Yeah, right. And enters the body and heals people. But they're all sitting around there very placidly with looking like human pincushions. And he said, well, these people are going to feel much, much better for having come here, and we will have them sign a paper saying they were properly treated at the acupuncture clinic, and that's all we need to get our funding for the next year. They were being very pragmatic about it, but they confessed that they knew that it was suggestion and it was the ideomotor effect, the placebo effect. I'll be all right, keep your seats. The placebo effect, and that in some cases it really worked for these people, and they went away very satisfied. They had to do this fakery knowing that it was fakery.
Okay, we've got one more. Hurrah!
Hey. Where's that?
Where's that? Well, it's blank because I happen to have the 2 representatives sitting here to my right.
And you're a representative as well.
Oh, you guys have got more to say. Tell me more about these
I've been
Australian
out of the country
skeptics.
for 5 years.
Oh,
I don't know what's going on.
Tell the people, where have you gone like a traditional Australian roaming the world? Why are you here?
Well, I've come here to do some research and to lecture at the University of California, Berkeley. And so it's been an interesting experience to see the climate, the skeptical climate here, and as opposed to the situation in Australia. And I'd say pretty much I think people tend to think that Australians are cynical people. We have a love of humour and irony, and that therefore we're inherently sceptical in some way. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that we have the same beliefs, the same pseudoscience and the same paranormal beliefs that people have here in Australia as well. I think it's a very similar climate.
Using the blogging networks, we started up the blog circle called the Skeptics of Carlos, which I even wrote to you about and said, if it's okay if we use this.
Some of you may not realise the significance of what Kylie says, Skeptics of Carlos. Who's heard of the great Carlos hoax? Most people, some people have, not many. Mr. Randi, would you care to spend the next 5 minutes?
Well, funny you should ask. I got a call one day at my home in Florida from a gentleman with Channel 9. I think it was Channel 9, was it? Yes, okay. With Channel 9 who said, Mr. Randi, and I won't go through the whole invitation. he simply signified to me that they were interested in investigating channelers. Now, this was at the height of the fame of the channelers all over the world. That was the big thing. Everything was dedicated to channelers in the woo-woo field.
It was like Shirley MacLaine was popular then.
Yes, exactly. I remember her. She used to act, But in any case, Out on a Limb. Remember the name of the book?
Yeah.
Really out on a limb. They asked me if they had some way that they could investigate the channelers, and I said, well, you can't investigate something that claims to be 5,000 to 8,000 years old on an average because these people are all effectively dead. But I said, what you can do is you could set up a channeler and show how easy it is to create a channeler with a considerable reputation. And they said, oh, well, we'll find an actor. And I said, no, wait, one moment. And I just covered the phone. And I said to Jose Alvarez, the performance artist, who was with me at that very moment when the call came in, I said, Jose, he said, yeah. I said, you want to go to Australia? And he said, sure, what do I have to do? I said, never mind, it's in the bag. And I just turned to him and I said, I've got the man for you, and we'll create a channeler. And I said on the other end, oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. What shall we do? And I said, well, I'll send you mail on it. Anyway, we negotiated. Pretty soon they sent over Richard Carlton. Carlton? Yes.
Richard Carlton.
Now deceased, unfortunately, rather prematurely. They sent him over. He was a host on 60 Minutes Australia. They do one there as well, as you see. And to cut a very long story rather short, a couple of months after that, we traveled off to Australia. Carlos went with his manager, first class, in the same plane where I was in steerage at the back. And when we got off the plane, I don't know whether I ever told you this, Richard. This is cute, I think. When I got off the plane, there was press all over the place. They had done a wonderful promotion job because Carlos, the channeler, was coming to Australia, and they had all the press following him as he got off the plane and as he came in through customs and immigration and such. And I'm at the other end of this in the tourist class, of course, and I hear a voice ringing out over the whole area, Mr. Randi, come over here. And what the hell is it? And it was a fellow who recognized me from another appearance on television, and he wanted to be the one to see me through the immigration process and whatnot. And I got over to him. I said, I don't want people to know I'm here. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Randi. Let's cool it. But no one noticed me. They were all paying attention to Carlos. I walked out the front with my suitcases in my hand, and here comes Carlos and his manager going on a red carpet into a limousine. And I stayed at a rather down at the heel hotel down the street. I didn't want to be noticed. And he stayed in the penthouse along with George, the singer. I can't think of the guy's name. Anyway, a rock singer. Michael, hey, you got it. Thank you, George Michael. Wow. Thank you very much. I'm glad you came. George Michaels, who was in an adjacent suite, and they spent a lot of time together. But it was such a sensation. We created the character Carlos. He got publicity. One day they came to us and said, we need front page news. I said, well, you can kill somebody. And he said, no, there's got to be an easier way to go about it. And George Negus, I believe the man's name was a host of a very popular morning show. And so we arranged to have a glass of water thrown in his face when he said something slighting about Carlos, that perhaps this was all a put-on or something, right in the face. And he's sitting there surprised. And they walked off the set. We got front page headlines on that. Negus assaulted on TV. And it was a day of little import. There was no meteorites hitting the earth or anything like that, or wars in Iraq. So I guess we got lucky that day. But we filled the Sydney Opera House, not filled it, no, I wouldn't say filled. We got a good crowd in the Sydney Opera House of people with beads and crystals and all kinds of things, looking devoutly. And he sat up there on stage, and I was cueing him from backstage in a concealed thing, very much like Peter Popoff, you see. We got the Popoff secret. And I was saying things like, there will be a world catastrophe. And Jose's out there wondering what he's going to follow this with. There will be a world catastrophe. And anyway, we got headlines. We got all kinds of newspaper space. And then on 60 Minutes Australia, it went on that weekend. And it was great because the first half hour was building up the myth of Carlos, the channeler. And then Richard Carlson said, but there was somebody else at the airport too. That in our second half hour. And then they showed this cloaked figure with the collar up around like this, and a fellow saying, "Mr. Randi!" So they showed that section of the thing. So I was the evil genius behind the whole thing. And it was very successful. We could not pay for a cab ride. We could not pick up a restaurant bill. We couldn't pay for anything in Sydney the next day. People were saying, "Oh, capital, wonderful. Oh, it was marvelous what you did. Marvelous." They couldn't get over it. We were heroes, but not with the press, who said that was not a funny thing to do, because they were all taken in by it. All the newspapers, all the TV channels ran Carlos. They were thoroughly taken, and we wanted to show that you could create a channeler based on totally fictitious information. We sent them clippings from TV Guide in this country that were totally fictitious. Programs that never existed, hosts that never existed, newspaper articles, the New York Times and such excerpts. Those articles never appeared. It would have taken them 15 minutes to find out whether that article ever appeared in the New York Times. It never did. But they didn't check up on it because it might spoil a perfectly good story to find out what was really behind it. No one checked up on it. Not even the top, Willesee and such other people, the top people in Australian television, never bothered to check up on the details that we had given, and it was all fiction. We even named a Thursday, July the 2nd. No, Thursday was not July the 2nd. That was July the 4th that year. But they didn't check up even to see whether the dates might have been possibly correct or physically possible. No one checked up on anything in the media. They printed it because it was a hot story, and it was attractive, and it was full of woo-woo.
Now, that report James Randi discusses, the 60 Minutes where they said, "This is an amazing man," and but wait till you see the second half. That's online. And I sincerely recommend you Google Carlos, James Randi, words like that, and you'll find the video. It's classic, and it's repeated. The story, at least, is repeated almost every year in Australia, where we have the greatest hoaxes of all time, or the greatest stuff like that. So it's there forever, and it's a really good lesson to everybody, I think.
Yeah. Have we learnt anything from it, though?
Yeah, we've learnt that James Randi keeps doing things. That's what we've...
Has the media learnt?
Especially in Australia. The media... I don't know if the media...
And then there was that fellow Don, who was the host of the program, but that's a different matter.
Yeah. You can find that on YouTube.
You can, too. If you Google James Randi and Don Lane, you'll see a very interesting clip, but I won't spoil it. Confrontation on Australian television.
I know that we're starting to run out of time. I don't know if there's any further question.
Yeah. We're technically out of time.
Cool. Oh,
by like 3 or 4 minutes now. So, thank all of you for coming. Thank you, Randi, for joining in. I mean,
yes, thank you.
I should have had you on this anyway.
I was forced. They twisted my arm.
And you came as Darkwing Duck. Well, it's Dragon Con. You had to have a costume at some point.
Hello, my name is Michael Wolloghan, and welcome to The Roundup, where I share news and views that will interest skeptics, humanists, secularists, and followers of the flying spaghetti monster. My first story relates to the Academy Award-winning actor, director and producer Mel Gibson, probably most well known for his crass, bloodthirsty, sensationalistic, pornographic bloodbath of a film, The Passion of the Christ, and for saying Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world when arrested in July 2006 for drink driving. But I digress. Mel Gibson has put another $15.2 million into his controversial private church in California's exclusive beachside suburb of Malibu. US federal tax filings showed Gibson's Holy Family Catholic Church now has tax-free assets worth a total of $64 million. Gibson is the sole contributor to the church, which is a small congregation of about 70 members and follows a 500-year-old ethos. Gibson is a passionate, sometimes frothing at the mouth member of the Catholic Traditionalist movement, a small but disturbingly growing Catholic sect. The Catholic Traditionalist movement believe the New Testament is to be taken literally, and the rules and rituals of the Church are to be rigidly followed. They celebrate Mass in Latin and believe that no other language should be used during a church service. In the Catholic Traditionalist world, there is no debate or discussion on the issues of abortion and contraception, and women can't perform church duties. Frequent confession is needed. Believing in purgatory is a must. Eating meat on Fridays is forbidden. Female followers must abide by a strict dress code requiring them to wear long skirts and veils over their hair. Indeed, it sounds like a real whale of a time. It's possible that Mel Gibson picked up on some of his beliefs from his father. Gibson's father, Hutton, belongs to the extreme fringe of the Catholic traditionalist movement, which has gone so far as claiming that the church in Rome has been taken over by a weird coalition of Jews and Freemasons acting for Satan. Gibson Sr. is a self-confessed anti-Semite and Holocaust denier. In one radio interview he claimed there were no Nazi extermination camps, and went on to claim they're after one world religion and one world government. That's why they've attacked the Catholic Church so strongly, to ultimately take control over it by their doctrine. However, such conspiracy theories are not representative of the traditionalist movement as a whole, or Mel Gibson. Though traditionalists don't believe in reaching out to other Christian faiths, and are angry the Second Vatican Council changed its official opinion of non-Catholics from heretics to recognising them as separate brethren. Mel Gibson's secretive sect is not recognised by the Catholic Church because it does not acknowledge the authority of the Pope or the Vatican. Gibson's church's financial coffers are impressive, particularly when compared to the funds of other religious organisations in the US. In the past 2 years, Gibson has overseen the building of a much bigger Spanish mission-style church, located 400 metres up the hill from the current building, which will seat about 400 people. The church, launched in 1999, is on the famed Mulholland Drive, set among lush Tuscan-style gardens. It does not welcome strangers, has high fences and a heavy security presence. Traditionalists would like nothing more than to be transported back to a time where Catholicism enjoyed an unrivaled control over politics and cultural life. They would love to return to a mystical, irrational age where life's uncertainties could be answered by blind faith and obedience in the Bible. As skeptics, we hope these archaic ideas remain in the past, and that some Catholic traditionalists might stray from the straight and narrow-minded path. Just when you thought reality TV couldn't get any more tedious, lame and pointless, here comes a story from the USA. Bob Larson, a sensationalistic and controversial Christian minister who says he has lived through frightening scenes similar to those from the movie The Exorcist, now has his own reality TV show. It's cleverly called The Real Exorcist. Move over Ozzy Osbourne. Who wouldn't want to watch Bob Larson battling Satan and his evil minions with his trusty Bible and dramatic cross? The 63-year-old minister says he has performed more than 6,000 exorcisms in 19 nations, and reports having been kicked, choked and spat upon by people whose demons resisted the prayers of deliverance, or perhaps just didn't like the smell of his deodorant. Bob Larson has written more than 30 books. One of them is called The Senator's Agenda, which is a political thriller that reveals how some in government will stop at nothing, even murder, to promote the evil agendas of abortion and homosexuality. Clearly he isn't a fan of the funny, extravagantly silly Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Larson for 20 years hosted a broadcast radio program which discussed Satanism and satanic possession incessantly. He realises some people think he is merely a bold showman or a charlatan taking people's money. Some skeptics claim he has made a highly profitable career out of preying on vulnerable people. Larson has said, "This is real. It's not some sort of gimmick I came across a few months ago. It's a normal part of what Jesus Christ did and taught his disciples to do." Larson sees his TV show as an opportunity to show the world that evil spirits and demonic possessions are real, and that people who are suffering can get help. By watching Larson cast out evil spirits on his show, people who think they have demon problems will feel as though they've been, quote, given permission, end quote, to talk about their fears and seek help, Larson said. The demon-possessed subjects on The Real Exorcist were chosen from among hundreds of responses to an online posting at boblarson.org. Larson is laughably creating a website, demontest.com, which has 21 questions for people to take and assess whether they have low, moderate, or high probability of demon possession. It's important to note that demonic possession is not recognised as a valid psychiatric or medical diagnosis, and people who profess a belief in demonic possession usually have symptoms associated with mental illness, such as hysteria, mania, psychosis, epilepsy, or schizophrenia. Sadly, there are numerous cases of exorcisms gone wrong. In 2001, a 37-year-old woman was strangled to death in an exorcism by a Korean church minister working in New Zealand. The minister, Luke Lee, was found guilty of manslaughter. Bob Larson might not be a huckster and may have good intentions, but should he be performing exorcisms on people that should be really under psychiatric care? One might even suggest that Larson, who believes he has the ability to sum up the power of God to thwart demons and devils, needs a little help himself.
Ben Radford is managing editor of Skeptical Inquirer and the Spanish-language skeptical magazine Pensar. He's a prolific writer for various publications, including LiveScience.com, and is the author of the book Media Mythmakers, co-author of Hoaxes, Myths and Manias, and also Lake Monster Mysteries, the latter co-written with none other than skeptic Joe Nickell. Ben is a rare commodity, one of the world's very few scientific paranormal investigators, minus the EMF detectors, dowsing rods and pendulums. He has spent a decade investigating numerous claims of the paranormal, including haunted houses, Bigfoot, psychic detectives, urban legends, and much more. With so much to talk about, I caught up with Ben at his office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we discussed his work as a paranormal investigator of the skeptical kind. Ben is also the non-theological creator of the controversial game Playing Gods, the board game of divine domination. It's a game of plagues, pestilence, smiting, conversion and resurrection, and you're urged to be your own god.
Yeah, it's been several years in the gestation, but I just recently produced a board game called Playing Gods, the board game of divine domination, and it's basically like a theological risk. So if different people can play gods, and you get to kill off other gods' followers with lightning, plagues, locusts, or you can try and convert them. It's very satirical.
Very fun, and something that all skeptics would like to be able to do, I think. So I described you as a skeptical investigator. Would that be an appropriate label?
If I go into a ghost investigation, I might not introduce myself as a skeptical investigator. But typically, the label I prefer is scientific paranormal investigator. Because there are lots of paranormal investigators out there. There's
many,
hundreds out there. But most of them aren't versed at all in scientific methodologies or critical thinking. So that little label helps to, the adjective helps to distinguish me.
Yeah, we need to differentiate ourselves from paranormal investigators of the non-skeptical kind. So you have a broad range of interests and specialties in your investigations. Some of these include urban legends and cryptozoology, monsters such as Bigfoot and lake monsters, hauntings and ghosts and psychic detectives. Have you got any other interests? Or?
To be honest, I have, I would say, about a half dozen sort of specialties that I've written on and published and investigated more so than others. For example, lake monsters, Bigfoot, urban legends, psychic detectives, ghosts, things like that. So there's maybe a half dozen sort of core topics.
Perennial subjects that just keep raising their ugly heads. Right,
that I'm especially just having done it for a long time. And then there's like a secondary tier of other things such as crop circles or miracles or stigmata or what have you.
I like that secondary tier, yes. And why are you a skeptic? What led you to skepticism?
Well, basically, when I was growing up here in New Mexico, I had during the summer times as a boy, I would go and take my allowance money and go to the used bookstore, and I would plunk down $5 and get a handful of books. And I was very interested in many of the sort of believer books, on Bermuda Triangle and ghosts and this and that. And they were filled with stories that were just amazing and supposedly true. And
did you believe in them when you were
young? I did a little bit, but I think even then, this is back when I was probably 12, 14 years old, I would read the stories and it seemed very authoritative. But then I said, well, hold on.
Not very critical.
Right, not very critical, and there was never, as far as I can recall, any references. It was all sort of, this person says this, and I started to say, well, maybe that's true. I don't know that's not true.
So it was a red flag if there aren't references.
Right, and so I said, well, is there another side to the story? Is there only this one person saying this? What's this person's name? What date did this happen? How did it happen?
It's still quite an advanced thought, because I think most people read these books and just accept them, as you said. They seem all authoritative and they don't think critically. They don't think beyond what they read. And there's something about something being in a book that seems to lend it some authority as well.
The credibility of the printed word.
Yes, which isn't always the case.
Right.
So why... Oh, you were telling us anyway how you gradually came to skepticism.
Yes, well, I had had that interest in those sorts of books, and
you didn't believe in the tooth fairy.
I wasn't sure about the tooth fairy. It did seem odd. I was thinking, well, if the tooth fairy, I didn't know the tooth fairy was necessarily an American invention. But I'm thinking, what if the tooth fairy is German? Am I left Deutschmarks? or South Africa. Do the Tooth Fairy leave Rand in South Africa?
Oh, you've been a skeptic for a long time.
Well, yeah. So it's always been. I've always been interested in that. And at one point, it's
looking for the holes in the plot.
Yeah. Well, that's because I find that to be the most interesting part of things. I look for the seams, the joints of stories, and the veneers. The big parts are obvious in the real world. The parts that are less obvious and more interesting to me are the lines that differentiate, a story from a narrative from an eyewitness account. What's truth, what's not truth, does it change, things like that. So, to me, it's the sort of the divisions that really interest me.
So why do you think people like you and I are fascinated by the paranormal when we're not believers? Why do you think we maintain this interest in the paranormal when we're skeptics?
Well, just speaking for myself, is that I'm always interested in the world itself and the way the world works and why people believe things. And so, to my mind, if I were convinced that these things didn't exist, if I knew absolutely certain that ghosts didn't exist or Bigfoot didn't exist or what have you, I wouldn't waste my time.
I'm leaving the door open.
Yeah, I'm genuinely open-minded and curious. Now, of course, as they say, it's the ideal is to have a mind that's open, but not so open that your brains fall out. And so, to me, that's an important distinction: is being open-minded and not dismissing claims a priori. But you go into it and you say, okay, because I get this a lot, where someone will they'll be dismissive and say, oh, you're just a debunker, you're trying to disprove things, and I say, people come to me and say, I know for a fact Bigfoot exists because I've seen it, and I say, well, hold on here, you think I'm closed-minded, and you just told me that you are certain that Bigfoot exists. I said, I don't know if the Bigfoot exists or not. I said, if you think about it, you're the one that's closed-minded because you're convinced that it's not possible that Bigfoot does not exist, that ghosts do not exist.
Not opening themselves up to other ways of thinking about that.
Right. So I find it ironic that a lot of times the very people who are accusing skeptics of being closed-minded, they themselves have come to the conclusion that these things exist. They are not open to the idea they don't exist. And whereas
that's very true.
I'm open to it either way. I just want better evidence.
I think, the best skeptics do have open minds. I think that's a very important thing. But have you worked with any believers groups before?
I have. On occasion, I've been included, sometimes grudgingly, sometimes not, in investigations with sort of the believer side as the token skeptic. And I get, the reactions have been mixed. Sometimes they're appreciative and they like having somebody who's keeping the reins on the evidence. Other times they grow weary of reality.
Raining on their parade.
Right, and they we're doing the EVPs and the things and I believe you're sincere. I don't think you're stupid. You're not trying to hoax anybody, but just look for a second and explain to me the assumptions. What is the basis for your claim that orbs are ghosts? What is the basis for your claim that EMF detectors detect ghosts? And when you ask them about these assumptions, oftentimes it hasn't occurred to them.
They haven't really pondered it at all.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that the basic premises of what they're doing have completely been lost on them. We never thought about that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's sort of like going to a mechanic and saying, why do you think this particular tool will fix the car? Well, I don't know, I've never tried it.
I think they've read certain books and they're sort of perpetuating certain processes and ways of doing things, but without really understanding the basis for it at all.
Absolutely.
But what sort of evidence has been presented to you over the years?
In my decade or so of doing these sorts of investigations, talking about ghosts specifically, I've had the usual gamut. Orbs. I've got lots of orb photos, EVPs.
I think that's actually losing credibility in the field somewhat. Orb photographs. I think they're online anyway. I'm seeing this growing trend of people being more dismissive of orb photographs. So I wonder, are they listening to us to some extent, or?
Oh, I think part of it is sort of grudgingly listening to some of the skeptics, and I think part of it is...
But they're dust particles or water particles.
Right, and just things that are floating around. think the other thing is that I think that they've sort of realized that the orbs are not getting them anywhere. That's not an answer.
That's a good point, yeah. I spoke with someone recently and she said, look, not all orbs are ghosts. 9 out of 10 orbs are not ghosts. So I don't know how you differentiate that.
Well, I've talked to people who say that they can differentiate real ghost orbs from others, and I asked them exactly how. I said, well, I have a secret method that I use.
Oh,
do
okay.
you now? Okay.
Yes. Right, a strategy.
Right. So
the system.
Yeah. So I mean, I've had everything from cold spots, weird feelings, headaches. I had a case I investigated in Buffalo several years back where the man of the house believed he'd been actually attacked by a ghost at night, and his bed was kicked, and there was a demonic face in a photo, and all sorts of strange things.
But as far as the scientific method is concerned, your background is in psychology. Do you think we should be really encouraging these ghost hunting groups to use the scientific methods, or do you think that we should really be discouraging them or dissuading them from doing what they're doing?
I encourage people to do whatever they want. If you really think Bigfoot is out there, yeah. I mean, if you are convinced that Bigfoot is living in Northern California, knock yourself out. Go get a pair of shoes, get yourself some hiking boots and a camera, and go find Bigfoot. Go for it.
Lots of groups there.
If you really believe that the ghosts are out there, so I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is, to my mind, if you're not going to do it scientifically, if you're not going to do it methodically, if you're not going to bring critical thinking to it, then you're wasting your time. Frankly,
just a hobby.
The proof is in the pudding here. I mean, this in the case of with most of these topics, whether it's ghosts or Bigfoot, what have you, the evidence has not gotten any better over the last decades, and so
that's true. That's a very good point.
The question is why?
Very stabilized.
Yeah, it's plateaued, if anything. So the question is, with more and more people looking for these things, with better and better equipment, cheaper.
But is it better equipment? I mean, therein lies one of my beefs with these people, that they're using scientific instruments, but that doesn't necessarily equate the scientific method.
Well, right. For example, by better equipment, I meant like for people looking for Bigfoot have access to better and cheaper cameras. Mm-hmm. But you're exactly right. Is that just having higher tech equipment doesn't mean that your research is any more valid.
Exactly, and these tools aren't necessarily designed for ghost busting purposes.
Yeah, whether it's digital thermometers or FLIR cameras or what have you. Again, they sort of take their cues from like the ghost hunters on TV, and they just they're using an EMF detector, then I must need to use it. Like, well, no.
It becomes its own standard.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a question for you that's really more of a favourite question of the paranormal show, so I'm sure that you've been asked this before. I know that I have. Have you ever witnessed anything inexplicable in all of these years of your investigations? You have ever witnessed anything that you consider to be supernatural or paranormal, or anything that you couldn't explain?
I have certainly encountered things that I couldn't explain. I think everybody has. I mean, if you're honest about yourself, I don't know everything, and I can't explain everything. Just because I can't explain it at that moment doesn't mean that it's unexplainable.
That's right.
So, for example, I might see something in the sky at night, as I'm driving home, and it shoots across the sky. Can I explain that? No. I mean, I don't know what that was. With some research, I could probably figure it out. But so, oftentimes it's not worthwhile. It's not notable enough. So there are lots of things that I've experienced that are unusual or odd. But I don't assume that just because I can't explain it means there is no explanation.
Would you like to actually see a ghost? Because I think a lot of believers think that we're just naysayers and we don't believe, we don't want to believe, that there's something holding us back from believing. So would you like to uncover a new species, or would you like to meet Elvis?
Well, certainly. I would love to be the first person to prove that ghosts exist or to see a Bigfoot. Because
I can't think of a skeptic that I've ever worked with who didn't want to live in a haunted house or didn't want to see a ghost.
Well, you're exactly right. And what I find interesting is that a lot of times the people who are critical of the skeptics have this idea, this sort of bizarre notion that the skeptics are somehow uncomfortable with the idea of the paranormal. We're so terrified that it doesn't fit into the scientific paradigms that we like, fall into that we fall into a queasy, quivering puddle if we saw something. And I'm like, no, let's.
I guess this goes back to them thinking that if we're around, that we give off negative energy.
Yeah.
As well.
How convenient.
Yes, a nice way of rationalising things. Are there any places that you would like to investigate that you haven't been to so far? So stories that you might treat in the future?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I have a backlog of several dozen investigations and cases that I've looked into and investigated, and in some cases finished, and other ones not. So I still got a long backlog, but I've there are a couple places that I've always wanted to. I mean, for example, Stonehenge. Last time I was in London, I didn't get around to seeing Stonehenge. I'd like to see that.
And you struck me as being like me, and wherever you go, there are always stories, and you'll just treat them as you come across them.
Sure, and sometimes those are the most interesting ones. At least in my mind, one of the things I learned from the great Joe Nichols, senior research fellow at Sojka, is being opportunistic. So if you're, like, for example, when I was in Newfoundland in Canada, before I went to Newfoundland, I did some research on it. I found a Spring Hill Jack sighting in St. John's. I found a giant squid that washed up. There was a lake monster up there that turned into a chapter in my book. There were all sorts of things. So if you do some research and you look into it, there's almost nowhere in the world where there isn't some story of a ghost or a monster or some sort of.
That's true. I found that to be the case as well. I've travelled extensively and throughout this country and internationally, and there's just always something, always a story, even in small towns.
Mm-hmm.
So, just finally, if people would like to find out more about your work and to read your articles, if listeners would like to contact you somehow, what are the ways that they can get in touch with you? You've got websites and blogs and...
Yeah, well, certainly if people are interested, they go to my website, radfordbooks.com, radfordbooks.com. Also, for my board game, playinggods.com. I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere.
And lots more to come.
There you go.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. It's good to get a chance to talk to the skeptics down under and the podcasters out there. So.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hello, Sydney Skeptics in the pub. How are you all? Very good. Welcome to this very special first live edition of Dr. Rachie Reports. And hello to everyone here. And say hello to all our listeners. Yay. Okay, well, last week I did a talk at the Zoological Society at Taronga Zoo here in Sydney, and it was for a forum which was about science under siege. And it was basically a group of scientists getting together and having a whinge, but also genuinely voicing their complaints about how it is difficult to work in science these days. And some of those complaints included the fact that we don't get a lot of funding, or we only get funding for a very short period of time. Some of our science gets utilised in ways to suit, for example, politicians when it comes to things like climate change. And I was lucky enough to participate in this forum, and I talked about the hijacking of scientific terminology and technology by proponents of alternative medicine. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was some experiences I had at the Mind Body Spirit Festival recently. And I witnessed a large amount of the hijacking of scientific terminology and also scientific technology. And many of you here have been to the Mind Body Spirit, haven't you? Yes. Who has been? It's a fantastic array of all kinds of cam and woo and well-being, from supplements to, nice clothes and smelly candles, to stuff can get quite dangerous. And I wanted to present to you today a little case study about a modality known as hair analysis. Now, some of you may have listened to my podcast a couple of weeks back where I talked about live blood analysis. Did anyone hear that or read the blog?
Yes.
Say yes. Hair analysis is similar technique in that you will give a sample of your hair to these people. You'll pay a nominal fee, generally about 195 Australian dollars. They actually refer to it as the affordable way to determine what's making you sick. Now, I've questioned that to begin with. But what I wanted to bring to your attention is how they hijack real science and scientific technology and terminology to lend legitimacy to their, basically, quackery. And so what you'll do is you'll give them a piece of your hair, and I actually saw this in action at the Mind Body Spirit a couple of weeks ago. They have a machine, they stick a piece of your hair into a beaker, a few lights flash, a dial flickers, and then there's attached to that is a computer screen and a printer, and it prints out what I term randomly generated piece of paper with things that they claim they can tell about your allergies from your hair. So we watched this in action a couple of weeks ago, and I was interested actually as to how this worked, because I'm a scientist, so I kind of have some idea of the scientific method, and to me it didn't look very scientific. And the first example of the hijacking of scientific terminology, which I want to bring to your attention, was that it's done with quantum technology. Now, isn't this fantastic, guys? I mean, I've got friends who work in physics, and I know they've been working on quantum for quite a long time, and I reckon they'd be pleased to know that this stuff is working in alternative medicine, because it sure as hell isn't working in real science. So what they say to you is that they'll do biocompatibility testing, and they claim that they can determine from analysing your hair in this fashion whether you're allergic to about 300 different compounds, and you'll get a printout that will say, okay, you shouldn't eat tomatoes, but you can eat mushrooms, or you can eat macadamia nuts, but don't eat peanuts. And they become really specific. In one of these printouts that I saw, it said, don't use cold power blue, but I guess cold power yellow is fine. And don't eat Swiss cheese, but, you know, cheese from Gruyere is fine. So it must be the quantum, I think, that's making it this clever. And as I mentioned, it's only $195. And then what you do is you follow their advice for a period of a couple of months. After that time, during that time, they might recommend you take some of their expensive supplements, which are upwards of about $100 a kilo. And then after that period, you come back for a second follow-up test so they can determine if you are better. Now, this technique, hair analysis, is in fact a legitimate scientific technique. And so by clouding this technique with the quantum and saying they can do all this stuff is really deceitful. In fact, I've got an instance where hair analysis is currently being used in real science, and it's a fascinating story. A friend of mine is an ethnobotanist, and he's been doing studies of indigenous populations across the world for some time. And he's recently been looking at the Chamorro people, who are the indigenous people of Guam, which, as you know, are islands owned by the United States. And it was found that these people had a 50 to 100 times greater incidence of a motor neuron disease, which was similar to Parkinson's, sort of like Alzheimer's, and a bit like ALS, which is what Stephen Hawking has. And when he went to investigate this to try and figure out why these people had such a higher rate of this disease, he found out that it was linked to their diet. Now, what's interesting about this is it turned out when they did post-mortem and looked at their motor neurons, they found this high level of a toxic amino acid. And when he looked through their diet, he found out that it occurs in the seeds from the cycad tree. And in fact, these people, the Chamorros, they use the cycad seeds to make flour, to make tortillas, but they know that it contains a toxin, so they generally wash the flour really well to make sure they don't get the toxin. But what was happening was the local fruit bat population loves to eat the cycad seeds, and the local indigenous people like to eat the fruit bats. So essentially you were getting the concentration of this toxin in the fruit bats, and then the people were making a coconut soup out of these fruit bats, where they just get the whole animal and they'd cook it up in coconut milk and eat everything, including the brain, the bones, the skin, the wings, everything. And just as an aside, and you don't need to put this in the podcast, Richard, did anyone watch Survivor last night?
Oh, this stays in the podcast.
Because there was a Survivor auction where you could get a reward. You would bid for something that you couldn't see. It was covered. And one guy bid something like $250 and got a bat coconut soup. And I watched in horror as this guy ate it, thinking, now that I know this stuff, I wouldn't go there. But anyway, I digress. So basically, this gentleman, Dr. Paul Cox, has found a way to actually measure the levels of this toxic amino acid through your hair. And this is now a test that he's using to determine if people are at a greater risk of getting this ALS-PD type illness. But of course, he doesn't do it by sitting at a Mind Body Spirit festival with a machine that flickers and glows and, lights up at you. He uses high-end mass spectrometry, gas chromatography. It's quite a complicated, long-winded process, and it is real science, and it's actually helping to diagnose this disease in Indigenous populations across the world. And in fact, it turns out, this would be of interest to a lot of you here, this particular toxin exists in what's known as cyanobacteria. Does anyone know what cyanobacteria are?
No.
Blue-green algae. So some of us would have heard of incidences where we get blooms of blue-green algae in our drinking water, and the government tells us it's all right, we've sprayed it, it's dead, don't worry about it. Well, I think we might need to worry about it a little bit. I'm not saying don't trust the government, this is not a conspiracy podcast. It's not. But the take-home message from Dr. Cox was, whatever you do, just don't drink green, dirty water. Just don't. And don't eat fruit bats either. So, my point is that this is a legitimate scientific technique. It's being used for good science and for medicine across the world. And the thing with alternative medicine proponents is they will hijack these sort of things. They'll use the terminology to lend legitimacy to their product. And for somebody who doesn't have a scientific background or is not very scientifically literate, it's very difficult to determine whether they're telling the truth or whether what they're doing is real. And so these people who call themselves NDs, which is, as we know, Richard?
Not a doctor.
That's correct. Or naturopathic doctor. Same thing. They are targeting these vulnerable people and taking their money from them when they are in very desperate situations. And by hijacking scientific terminology and technology, it makes it even more deceitful. So, that's just one example, and I'm afraid to tell you there are many, many, many more. And the presentation I gave at Taronga Zoo last week, I showed some pictures of some of the machinery that these people use and then give exotic names to. And probably if you heard my Dr. Rachie reports on live blood analysis or read my blog, you'd see they use special microscopes that are only used in the Pasteur Institute and the Scripps Laboratory. And they actually are used there, but they're used for real science, not for live blood analysis. So this is not the worst of there's a lot more, but I think we'll leave it now for the next episode of Dr. Rachie Reports. So thank you, everyone.
Congratulations to Adam Hocking of West End, Queensland, who is our winner for the Death from the Skies prize. He has sent in to us a fabulous new Skeptic Zone t-shirt logo and slogan that you'll be able to see on our Zazzle range. Many, many thanks to those who entered. It was a really tough choice, and we appreciate all of your creativity. We'll be looking forward to running another contest soon, and in the meantime, feel free to send us your ideas and your feedback to our website on www.skepticzone.tv. And of course, you can always continue to show your support for the Skeptic Zone by reviewing us on iTunes and digging us on Dig.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
Well, welcome again to the Think Tank, and we're Amanda. What's so funny. As you can tell, I'm not with the normal think tank people. A couple of the normal think tank people. I've got Amanda.
None of the normal think tank.
They're not
people.
normal. I have Amanda Rose. Hello, Amanda.
Hello.
And Rachel Dunlop, of course.
Hello, Richard.
And our special guest filling in for Michael Wolloghan today on the think tank is none other than Tiffany Day from Macquarie Skeptics. Hello, Tiffany.
Hello.
Hello. Glad you could make it here to our favourite club where we love to do the think tank. So cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
A big shout out to our good friends at the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, and a big thank you for them for mentioning us, because Steve Novella, as you will recall from our last episode, was our special guest as an interview, and they gave us a good mention at the end of their show. And I've had so many people contact me so excited that the SGU team are coming to Australia. I know it's 2 years away, but still, some guy came up to me and said, I have to now plan my holidays for that time of the year to follow them around the country.
And we've had people email us and offer to help out in any way they can with organising the SGU trip.
So if you don't listen to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe podcast, Zone listeners, please do. It's one of the best skeptical podcasts out there. And if you feel so inclined, please assist them with donations to help them come to Australia in 2 years' time, and I think we'll all benefit. You listen to the SGU people?
Sure do.
Yeah. And I must also thank all the Zone listeners and other people out there who donated to my Movember campaign.
That's
Where
okay.
is the Mo? Where is the Mo?
The Mo went down the sink, actually. But thanks to the generosity of Zone listeners and other friends, I raised, or my moustache raised, over $800 for medical research. So I'm very happy, and again, a big thank you. Thank you, everybody. That's great. Rachel, do you have anything for us today?
Sure, I do actually. I've got a story about a poll that was done in the UK recently of 3,000 people, and it came up that 58% of people believe in the supernatural, whilst only 54% believe in God.
Wait a minute. God is supernatural. Oh, no, okay, I'm
okay, you're being pedantic. All right. Just more people believe in aliens and ghosts than in God. A new survey finds from a British newspaper. Now, there could be some sort of confounding variables in this survey for the reason that it was done by a marketing firm and it was released with an X-Files DVD. Right? So I think maybe their audience was a bit self-selecting. However, one of the researchers did say that paranormal beliefs are very strongly negatively correlated with religious belief. So apparently most devout practitioners of religion have shown to be least likely to believe in the supernatural, and this is because religion discourages the belief in ghosts or aliens or Bigfoot, for example.
That's very interesting, because a lot of ghosts...
Why would they question ghosts if they're religious?
The Holy Spirit, you mean?
Yeah, well, it just makes sense to me that if they believe in God and that something happens to you after you die, isn't that the definition of what a ghost is?
Like that?
Yeah, shouldn't they be wandering around and floating around and haunting us?
I think that in Christian, Orthodox sort of Christian theology, I mean, you go to heaven or you go to hell, and that's where your spirits are, and they're not wandering the halls of an ancient
What if you're in limbo?
palace
What if you're a baby that wasn't baptised?
Well, I mean, that's a particular Catholic view, but I don't think that they even say that you're sort of wandering around with your head under your arm.
You mean it's not like Harry Potter?
But that's a good point, because I've had so many people calling themselves psychics who will say to me something like, God bless. And think, hang on, they're tying themselves to the Christianity religion by saying God bless.
Well, it doesn't have to be the Christian
That's just a figure of speech, though.
I know it's a figure of speech, but it's... They're claiming all these wonderful paranormal powers, which other Christians would identify with demonic influences.
Well, just to finish the story off, they quote in this article a survey that was done of US college students in 2006, and they found that 23% of freshmen had a general belief in paranormal concepts. However, which included astrology and things like communicating with the dead. And this number jumped to 31% amongst seniors and graduate students.
Well,
so it actually increased
Tiffany,
as they got more educated.
Being a current university student,
yes.
What do you think of about that situation? Many people in the early stages
in your experience, away with the pixies?
I'm not too sure about supernatural stuff per se. I know that a lot of the people at my university are religious and in particular Christian, and that was surprising to me when I first started there, because you'd expect at a university of people to be a bit more intelligent than the average Joe. It's a university. And I just didn't expect to see that amount. It is literally, the university is bombarded with religious paraphernalia.
Mostly evangelical Christians, right?
Yeah.
But it's mostly one group. There might be one or two groups.
No.
It's not like the
There's
evangelical
about 13 of them. Different groups. They all have different advertising, marketing all over the place, posters. They hold different events all the time. And like I've said before, our Macquarie Skeptics group is the only skeptical related group at the university. There's an atheist group, one other atheist group, but it's very small and it's still trying to get up on its feet. So there's nothing else. I just would expect there to be more skeptical groups at a university.
I think there will be. What interests me, Tiffany, because your speciality, what you're studying is astronomy, of course.
Yes.
One of the things I love that Dr. Phil Plait said was that the real universe out there is so much more wonderful and extensive and vast and awe-inspiring than any text from any religious book. You know?
I say that all the time, and so many other people have said it. Carl Sagan said something similar to that. I really don't understand how people aren't amazed at just reality, the reality of it all. All I can think of is that they're not aware, or their religion teaches them that that's not true. Fundamentalist Christians.
Well, they haven't learned yet. I don't know.
No, there are a lot of people out there that still think, the Earth is the centre of the universe and that kind of thing.
Now, Amanda, you were mentioning something to us earlier about a funny board game.
Very funny. Just a bit of a lighter segue. I saw something on my sister's blog a while ago.
What's your sister's blog?
It's called A Cunning Plan, cunningplan.blogspot.com. Her name is Cos, Richard knows her. She unfortunately has been smuggled off to live in America.
She lives in Flagstaff, Arizona.
She lives in Flagstaff, Arizona. And she blogged about this. She bought it. She went to a second-hand bookshop in Flagstaff called Bookman's and found this board game, which was $18. She says a mere $18. It doesn't sound mere to me, but she obviously thought it was worth it. And it is a very glossy, high-production, very professional-looking board game called Intelligent Design versus Evolution.
What?
Wow. But that's only the second part of the title.
You can't make this stuff up.
I saved the best for second. The first part of the title is Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron present.
Oh, no.
Intelligent Design
It's Kirk Cameron again.
Evolution. Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron. If you don't know about their fame in evangelical circles, just look up YouTube about the bananas and evolution.
The banana drop.
On.
Yes, I understand. Yes.
So I'll put these pictures on the website. But
Don't you know that one, Tiffany? You know that one,
yeah. But it's it's a board game called Intelligent Design and Evolution. It was second-hand, but Cos says that it was completely pristine. So someone's got it as a present and just look like this and
sold it to the second-hand bookshop.
Good.
But on the front of the box, it has a gold seal that with this quote: Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron are doing much more than revealing the bankruptcy of molecules to man evolution. Enjoy this wonderful family game as you also become better equipped to defend our precious Christian faith.
And Marrickville that was going to Wilson Park, Darwin Chill and Marrickville. This service will be departing in 5 minutes' time. Thank you.
Sorry.
I have to go, that's my bus.
That's a quote from a very famous Australian. Any guesses?
Ken Ham.
Ken Ham, Answers in Genesis.
I'm glad you brought up God, Amanda, because
anytime.
I came across God's Facebook page today. Have you seen God's Facebook page, Tiffany?
I'd love to add him as a friend.
Oh, you can, but actually apparently he's quite difficult to find. Richard's lost it.
You don't convert anymore, you just add God as a friend.
Well, this is the internet networking age, you know. No, well, apparently God has a Facebook page, but it is allegedly difficult to find. If you just type God into Facebook, you don't find anything.
Oh, really?
So,
what do you put, Yahweh or something?
His mysterious ways.
Well, yeah, God does work in mysterious ways, as you know.
You can't just search for him.
Maybe he comes to you when you're ready.
And he just magically appears in your friends.
If you want to find God, you have to use Seek.
No, you guys shouldn't take the mickey out of this because it's quite serious. If you have a look at God's wall, which I've just printed out here, you can see the series of how God created the world, and it's all documented on his wall.
Well, thank God for that.
So everyone head to Facebook and be friends with God.
I bet he cheats at Scrabulous.
I bet he does.
Oh, probably.
Now, talking about good friends, a big shout out to Tim and Carrie Iwin in Minnesota.
Hi, Timothy.
Hi, Carrie. Hi, Tim. Some of you may know I had a birthday in the last week since the last zone went to air.
Did we?
Happy birthday, Richard.
Thank you.
I had a birthday as well.
Oh, Rachel, you did too. I'm sorry.
We had a birthday party together.
Yeah,
did you forget that?
What birthday party? Oh, that birthday party.
Oh,
yes.
we were both a little bit happy.
I don't remember that. Did you have a birthday party?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, we don't remember it either.
Anyway, Tim and Carrie have sent me a fortune teller miracle fish.
Ooh.
Now, if you take the packet and read on the back, I'm going to put this fish in my hand. It's like a little bit of, what's it called?
Cellophane.
Cellophane,
yeah.
Okay, watch it. It's in my hand and it's curling up into a big, complete curl, both ends. Now, what does that signify?
That you're passionate, Richard.
Oh.
Or the fish is, I don't know.
No, it's flipped. It's flipped over in my hand.
Turns over, that's false. Therefore, you're not passionate?
Not passionate
or you're
anymore.
does that mean you're false? What's it doing now?
Oh, now it's gone back into a little...
Oh, it
curled
loves
up
you.
again.
It's passionate again.
Yes.
Can we try it on Tiffany?
Yes.
See if she's as passionate as you.
Oh, you can't put it down while it's passionate.
Hold on. It's so passionate, so to speak. It doesn't want to be.
It's in Tiffany's hand now, and the tail is flexing, and it's wriggling a little bit.
Oh, it's in love.
It's gone into a knot.
According to this, moving head and tail means it's in love with you, Tiffany.
Oh my gosh. Aren't I lucky?
Very
That's
lucky.
great.
That's lovely.
Now, Rachel, could you please tell our listeners, especially in Sydney for a moment, about the meetup group?
I can. Some of you may have heard of the website called meetup.com. It's a social networking website that contains hundreds and hundreds of different groups that have varied interests. I co-run the Sydney Skeptics meetup, and we've been going since February this year, and we've recently hit 111 members. And we organise lots of meetings around Sydney, lectures, science lectures, visits to things like the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, ghost tours, and we also regularly attend the Skeptics in the Pub, which is organised by you, Richard. Yeah, so if you are in Sydney, head to meetup.com and do a search for Sydney Skeptics and you'll find us, and you can join our group, and we send out emails every so often when we organise different functions or events, and you can come and meet some fellow skeptics.
And while we're at it, Tiffany, can you tell us a little bit more about the Macquarie Skeptics? How's that going?
Yes, it's going pretty good at the moment. We've got a group at our university, that's Macquarie University in North Ryde, Sydney. Our group is called the Macquarie Skeptics. You can find us at macquarieskeptics.com, or alternatively we have a Facebook group that we're very active on. On Facebook, just search for Skeptics at Macquarie and you'll find us. A lot of our events coincide with the Sydney Skeptics, what they're doing at the moment. A lot of us will be at the Skeptics in the Pub tomorrow night.
Yep.
We also have our own Macquarie Skeptics in the Pub. And at the moment we're just getting a whole bunch of exciting stuff organised for next year, such as a Skeptics Week.
And that's in direct response to Christ Week, isn't it, Tiffany?
Correct. There was a Christ Week at our university about a month ago or so.
What happens during Christ Week? Do people walk around exclaiming Christ? Or
yes,
when all the essays are due.
That's when all the essays are due to the man.
So they are exclaiming Christ then if all the essays are due.
It's Christ, why did I leave this to the last day? Quite familiar with that particular revelation. That epiphany.
Well, I'd like to thank Amanda Rose and Rachel Dunlop and Tiffany Day for joining me for this fabulous session of the Think Tank again.
Thanks, Richard. Good to be here again.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
And we look forward to another Think Tank in about 2 weeks' time.
Yay. Everyone go to iTunes and subscribe to keep us up there. If you have a spare computer, just add us, subscribe. We want to keep beating Oprah and Hillsong.
As I always say, tell one friend and 2 enemies about the show.
Fair enough.
Well, that was a great episode, Stefan.
Praise to everything.
Thank you, Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Yes.
Thank you, James Randi and Ben Radford.
Oh, goodness me. Now, they are spiritual beings. They really are.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so. Now, the next episode will be coming out in 2 weeks' time with so many special guests I can't even tell you. Check the website.
Is it almost a Christmas special?
It will almost be our Christmas special.
Well, that'll still keep us tipped into the religion and spirituality kind of section.
It's a very spiritual time of the year.
Very spiritual time of the year, very festive. So it's another great show, and thanks, listeners, for sticking around and for subscribing, because it really helps.
The numbers are just shooting up. We're looking at the charts, and they're in the thousands, and we're very happy. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and the feedback we're getting is that it's great to have an Aussie skeptic show. There's quite a few skeptic shows around, and we love them all. But us Aussies down under, we've got our own little way of doing things, and we love it. We love the fact that you're interested in it.
It's just upside down, that's all. And thanks to the people who've been writing. I know Dr. Rachie told me that she's been getting letters, emails asking her medical questions and quackery questions. So
really?
That's really great. Yeah, please keep your emails coming in. Send in those cards and letters.
Yes, excellent. And thanks for listening. Let's come back in 2 weeks' time and do it all again.
See you then, Steph.
All right, bye.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
Skeptic Zone.